Here goes my first attempt to record a 5-minute video for members of the families of missing persons. These are brief, informational videos because I'm too lazy to write a book and include all this information one chapter at a time. Basically, the information pertains to Western Australia specifically, where I've done about 10 years involvement in long-term missing persons research. It's applicable particularly to Western Australia, but more probably a little less specific to Australia, and may not be as relevant for some other nations like America, where they've got a much bigger population density than what we've got here, and a lot more police and FBI type resources. So for people in those countries, take from these series of videos what you can, ignore what's not applicable to you in your country. I think the first thing needs addressing is that going missing in Australia is not a crime. As a result, unlike murder or homicide, where the police have a legislated responsibility to try and solve felony crimes, in the case of missing persons, there is no actual legislated responsibility on police or anyone else to find your missing loved one. And as a result, I think there's a lot of information that members of the families of missing persons could do with knowing that isn't often spoken about and is very seldom written down. There isn't many missing persons for dummies 101 type books around that will assist the members of families of missing persons. So for that reason, I thought I might try and do a series of brief 5-minute videos and upload them to YouTube, and perhaps families will find some interest in those, and it may help them to make decisions and decide on what actions to take. Going missing is not a person in Australia. Going missing is not a crime in Australia because there are legitimate reasons that people sometimes go missing. Sometimes it is people placed into witness protection by the very police themselves. They're often given new identities, and their old identities are put into the missing persons cabinet at police headquarters to prevent nefarious criminals and so on from being able to track them down. Another example is that sometimes victims of spousal abuse and children of abusive spouses are given new identities by organisations like the Underground, who will put them into a new town and give them a new name under deed poll, and try and make it as difficult as possible for the abusive spouse to be able to track them or their children down. A third instance is members of our own and other countries' intelligence agencies sometimes are given new identities, and again their old identity is placed into the missing persons cabinet at police headquarters because that prevents people from being able to dig around and track them down. So one of the downsides of that is that for the members of the families of missing persons, a lot of them sleep at night thinking that the police are out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, looking for their member of their lost or missing person of their family. And the sad reality is that 99% of the time that's just not the case. Police don't have to report to Parliament here in Australia in their annual report on their success with clean-up rates for missing persons, the way that they do have to account for their budget with a clean-up rate for felony crimes and manslaughter and murder and so on. That's all reported onto Parliament, but basically police are not measured or kept on their toes, I suppose, for want of a better word. They're not kept on their toes by virtue of the fact that someone's watching over their shoulder to see how much they do and how successful they are. Very often you'll get anything up to 2 weeks of police resources dedicated to your missing person, missing family member. They might bring in police air wing resources with forward-looking infrared cameras and all sorts of stuff They may bring in the mounted horse squad, they may bring in tracker dogs from the police squad, they might bring in the state emergency service volunteers to assist, RAC rescue helicopters. There's a lot of assets that they can bring to bear in a short period of time, but it's extremely expensive. And you've got to remember that the budget that police get for missing persons is very, very low. That said, the police clean-up rate on missing persons is actually very high. I think here they clean up about 98%, which is a pretty good effort. It's the 2% that fall through the cracks who become long-term missing persons that families have got to deal with. And I think if they had the right information, it would be a lot easier for them to know the right things to do and to achieve a lot more in a shorter period of time for hopefully a lot less cost. I'm going to go a little long on this video. This will be just over 5 minutes, and say that social media is probably your best friend. It's cost effective, it's very quick, it's broad ranging and covers vast distances and so on. So the first thing is a very effective social media campaign using Facebook and others. You know, I'm not familiar with all the latest ones, Snapchat or whatever the kids use, I couldn't tell you, Twitter and all that sort of stuff. But yes, a social media campaign, an effective one, can be a very valuable resource, and that would be one of the first things I'd recommend to families. I'm going to end this one here because we're getting a bit long in the tooth to upload to YouTube and for people to watch. But there will be a series of these that will go into different aspects that families ought to know. Thanks, and I hope you find these helpful. If you do, please subscribe and please give it a thumbs up. Thanks indeed. Bye-bye.